Welcome to the Twins Mummy NA podcast. I'm your host, Carla, mum to twin toddlers and a baby, sharing honest stories from the front lines of multiples motherhood. Each month, you'll hear real stories from parents of multiples, practical tips from experts, and open conversations about the mental load that comes with raising multiple children at once. Whether you're a parent of twins, triplets, or simply love a heartwarming story about family life, pull up a chair and make yourself at home. You are very welcome to the Twins Mummy NA podcast. Today's episode is a very special one because it's the second instalment in our Multiples Mums group chat series. Conversations designed to feel like you've pulled up a chair with a warm drink in hand, surrounded by a group of mums who just get it. In this episode, we're diving into another big topic for parents of multiples, that is sleep. And my aim today is to help make this topic feel calmer, clear, and a whole lot more manageable for all of us. I'm really excited to be joined by the wonderful Rosy Whitwell. Rosy is a sleep consultant, a registered nurse, and a health visitor with over 20 years of experience in the NHS. Over the years, Rosy has supported countless families through the ups and downs of bedtimes, naps, and night wakings, helping both little ones and parents get the rest that we all need. Rosy, I'm so happy to have you here. A very warm welcome to the Twins Mummy NA podcast.
Hi, so lovely to be here.
To start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself and how your week is going so far.
Well, you did a great introduction there. Yeah, I would say it was my health visiting that led me down into this field, because back in my health visiting days, one of the main challenges that parents had was sleep. And I have to say, I hardly had any training in sleep as a health visitor, which might surprise some people, that you don't get anything on sleep really at all. Pick it up as you go along. Hopefully now health visitors are getting a little bit more education in this area. I've even started doing a bit of it myself. I spoke to some health visitors in Birmingham recently actually about what we can do to help parents with sleep. So yeah, I massively, I love the subject. I've been doing it for 9 years. I'm learning on the job all the time. I'm hoping that I'll learn some things about twins and multiples today. I'm always open to new ideas, because, when I do get multiple parents of multiples, coming to me for help, it's always, they're two individual babies but, they are individuals as well. So it's just such a huge topic, and I take my absolute hat off to you parents that have got more than one at once, because I'm always in awe of you. So yeah, that's a bit about me. My week, it's been a bit of a funny week. I've broken my finger, so
Rosy, how did you manage that?
It's really, I shut it in the dentist surgery door, so it wasn't a great day. Been to the dentist and I trapped my finger. So yeah, it sort of hinders everything you do, but never mind. The sunshine has been amazing this week. I don't know what it's like in Northern Ireland, but
I have a window just to the right of me here, and I'm just looking out, and we have green trees just in our garden, and the sun's just shining through them, and it's absolutely beautiful. Everybody's in good form, and definitely spring is on the way. It's great.
Yeah, I've got to, after this, I'm actually going to teach at some antenatal classes.
Oh, very good.
And one of the things I always say to parents is, very important when they're tiny newborns, but get outside if you can every day. And obviously when the weather's like this, it's so much easier, isn't it, to get outside.
Absolutely, definitely with you there. We managed a couple of walks this week, which is great, just to blow dust, all the old cobwebs off, and just get out, fresh air, fresh perspective. Yeah, completely.
Exactly. And if you've had a rough night, it can help boost your mood, can't it?
Definitely. Life-changing. Absolutely.
Life-changing.
Well, listen, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so sorry to hear about your finger, and that's very kind of you to join us here with a sore finger today. But no, we're delighted to have you on the podcast. Well, we make a start, Rosy, on all things sleep. Sleep deprivation is something almost every parent talks about, but parents of twins or triplets at times say it can feel relentless. From your experience, what makes sleep with multiples uniquely challenging?
Yeah, it is that trying to get them on a similar schedule at night that can be, not that's the hardest thing to get established, I would say.
Yeah.
And from my experience, that's even as they get older, actually, when they meet new challenges along the way, if one of them's teething and the other one isn't. And so it can be relentless. And it is, if you've got help, great that you can split the load, but not everybody has that. And, that can make it really difficult. I always, it's very easy to dismiss how difficult it is when you're not going through it yourself at that time.
Yeah.
So, it's for friends and family that don't know what it's like. I would say your group, the moral support that you must provide for your listeners, and get together with other multiple parents, because it does, they will really know how it feels. I suppose I get a couple of twins parents come to me every year, and obviously as a health visitor I came across twins a lot more, and it is that just relentlessness. So my advice is always just be really gentle on yourself. You weren't meant to be doing this alone. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because a lot of, especially new parents, think that they've got to manage everything themselves. And I think it's only with hindsight you think, I wish I'd asked for more help. Most people would be so happy to give it and help you out. Even if that means having a nap in the day, even if it's just 20 minutes, that can be so restorative. Even if that means, a neighbour or a friend just sitting with your little ones while you just don't have to be supervising for 20 minutes, So yes, it's
Absolutely.
just be gentle and kind to yourself.
Yeah, it's so true, Rosie. Like, I know I talk a lot about the importance of minding our mental health and maternal well-being, both on the Instagram and the podcast. And I think certainly for me, definitely in the first year of having my twins, and I have another baby now, baby Laura, who is about 5 months old, and I notice it again, certainly in this first year of motherhood with a new child or children, minding our mental health is such an important thing. And I think a huge factor of it, certainly for me, was sleep. Definitely. I think if you get a good night's sleep, things just feel much more manageable. But yeah, absolutely. Especially when you talked there at the start about getting outside, getting for some fresh air, the importance of all of that. I suppose a lot of people in our community, some multiples babies arrive early. Can I ask, does prematurity affect sleep patterns in those early months? And should parents be thinking about the corrected age when it comes to sleep expectations?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. I mean, babies aren't born with a circadian rhythm, so they don't know the difference between night and day. And I think, if they're a little bit premature, maybe been in a NICU for, a few weeks as well, with all the bright lights and everything. I think they are getting better. I think they are trying to dim lights more and be a little bit more mindful of the 24-hour rhythm that we're trying to establish. But yes, I think prematurity is a factor. And I think that, again, parents should be very gentle on themselves and not expect too much too soon, really, and just, roll with what's happening. I always say, and again, I'll be saying this at the antenatal classes this morning that I'm going to, if all you need to worry about in the first few months of baby's arrival, when it's to do with sleep, is just that you're establishing a circadian rhythm, and that you're not worrying about strict regimes and, how obviously you'll be told by the hospital and the midwives how often you need to wake them up to feed them. So obviously go with that. But apart from that, you really just need to be outside every day if you can. With multiples, obviously that is a logistical challenge to start with, especially, I'm sure. So even being by a brightly lit window can be helpful. It doesn't have to be sunny, just getting them used to the daytime and the nighttime. So in the day, keep them by windows that are bright. Don't try and put them, if they're having a nap, you don't need to keep it quiet. You don't need to have the blinds drawn. You just want them to be in the hustle and bustle of a, noisy, light house for those first few months of their arrival, really. So especially if they were premature, obviously for safety reasons, you want to keep them really close to you and have your eye on them. So parents get a bit confused sometimes, and you hear about putting them in a dark room with blackout blinds, but during the day, don't do that to start with. It's really important that you're establishing that circadian rhythm, and then at night time, keeping it dark and quiet. And so just getting them used to the difference. They won't know the difference to start with. So, don't think that you've got to be doing some amazing sleep regime and getting them into a bedtime routine too early. It's really when you feel ready. And the bedtime routine to start with can be really helpful for parents, so that there is that difference between night and day. So
Yeah.
obviously it all rolls into, and again, I'm sure it is even more intense with more than one. But the daytimes it's feeding, changing nappies,
Mhm.
naps, and the nighttime doesn't seem very different. So to make it feel different for you, especially to start with, it's helpful to just dim the lights in the evening, put some sleep clothes on, a nice sleep onesie or whatever they're going to go to sleep in, and then just not talk to them as much. So in the daytime, we're communicating with them and chatting to them, and at night time just keep it quite quiet. Obviously, if they're upset and you're reassuring, you're going to be speaking to them more, but generally just try and have a bit of a difference between night and day. And that's all really you can worry about. You don't need to worry about having them on you for contact naps. You don't need to worry about anything like that, because really whatever you do for the first 3 months, it's to do with how you can cope, really, rather than any strict routines that people want you to get into, maybe from outside the family. So yeah, just
Yeah.
you can't spoil them at all. And that, I think, again, parents worry that by picking them up when they cry and cuddling them for a nap in those early days, somehow they're going to ruin sleep for the future. But you
Yeah.
really aren't. You really aren't. It's just about how you can cope in the first few months.
Whilst you were talking, my mind went straight back to the moment when Laura was born. That first night in the hospital, all the emotions are there. You've just had a baby and it's just you and that baby alone in the hospital that first night. But
Yeah.
she did not sleep at all. And it was unbelievable because I had forgotten about the early newborn days. I had twins just 2 years prior, but I had forgotten everything. And my confidence kind of went with that as well.
Yeah.
But, I panicked. I think, gosh, she didn't sleep at all. What's wrong? And I thought, my goodness, is this what life's going to be like for us? What's it going to be like when I come home with twin toddlers and a baby that's not sleeping? But the situation was she couldn't, chose to bottle feed, and the little teats were just too big for her. So we moved to the little preemie teats, and then she started eating. And whenever she started eating, she started sleeping. So that was great. But it just reminded me of that moment, certainly in those early days, it could be a vulnerable old time. It certainly was for me, when you question everything. And
Yeah.
but no, that's really good advice. No, I thank you, because I thank you for that, because there's a lot of our listeners and a lot of people in our community with children of multiples who were born premature. So no, I think it's important to talk about that. Another big question that mums ask is, should twins and triplets be on the same sleep schedule? Is that even realistic, or does that create more pressure than it solves?
I think, having worked with, I mean, my sample of knowledge is probably smaller than yours, to be honest. But what I think it is helpful if you can get them on roughly the same schedule, but they are
Okay.
individual babies. If they
Yeah.
were born at separate times and were just siblings rather than twins, it wouldn't be, you wouldn't compare as much. So I think obviously what you can do, and obviously when they're having lots of naps, it's a bit more tricky because they will have different sleep needs and things. But as the naps reduce and you're getting down to sort of 2 or 3 naps, as they approach 5 or 6 months, I don't know how many naps is your 5-month-old on now? Is she on about three or 4 naps now?
I think about 3 naps now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Had
it
to think
can be a
there.
bit
Yeah.
easier then to sort of think of a more similar schedule for them. At the beginning, it's going to be a bit
Yeah.
sort of all over the place, and in the daytime, probably gives you a bit of grace if one's asleep and you're feeding the other one, or do. But probably in the beginning, when it's all over the place,
Yeah.
don't be too hard on yourself. Just go with the flow. At night time, I think it is helpful if you can wake them to feed them at the same time. Maybe have a rocker. Lots of people find the rocker chairs quite helpful, so that while you're feeding one and the other one's, you're trying to settle the other one after their feed. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think generally as they get older, it's easier to get them on the same schedule. But
Okay.
bearing in mind that they are, one child may wake earlier in the morning than
Yeah.
the other. So I think a lot of multiple parents would want the children to be together. in the same room.
Hmm.
Because they've been together in the room, they've been, they've got this amazingly close bond. But I think
Yeah.
if you're having sleep difficulties with one, or one is waking earlier or whatever, it's okay to give yourself permission to separate them for a little while if that's logistically possible, and might leave the one that's sleeping well alone and the other one work on their sleep, and then get them back together again when sleep's going well for both of them. So I think don't worry too much about separating them, especially if it's just for a short space of time and you need to get, at the end of the day, your mental health and your sleep is so important. Babies are really adaptable to change. They don't like it to start with, but if you do something a bit different for a couple of nights, they'll get used to it really quickly. So it's just protecting your sleep a bit more.
Yeah, no, that's very important. Definitely. I always maintain if you get a good night's sleep, everything just feels that bit more easier and more manageable the next day.
It does.
I was out at the Tots group this week with our twins and little Laura, and one of the questions, one of the mums, we were chatting about sleep. I was saying this podcast episode's coming up, and a big thing for one of the mums I spoke to was about environmental things. So she was keen to know, does things like light or sound or even bedtime timing make a difference whenever you've got more than one baby in the same room?
Yeah, so I think white noise can be really helpful if you've got, or even pink noise that some people prefer. You can sort of mask a few noises with white noise. Some people say to have their own white noise machine, so that they're in their own little bubble. The environment, amazing. Have your dark room at night time. Like I say, even from early on, especially as we go into the summer months now, you don't want any light to be creeping in. That basically, we have two different things that help us fall asleep at bedtime. And once a baby's circadian rhythm is developed at around 3 to 4 months, it's the same for them. They'll be producing some melatonin at bedtime. When the light starts to creep into the bedroom in the morning through a little slit of, the curtain or whatever, that can actually tell the brain it's time to wake up. So if you're having early morning wakings when the weather starts to, the sun, I think the clocks change next weekend, don't they?
That's right. Yes, I was going to ask you about that as well. That's a big one.
So as we start to get lighter, moving into spring, really get your blackout blinds sorted out. Really, that can be terribly helpful. And bed timing in terms of the other. So we have our circadian rhythm helping us fall asleep, and we also have what's called sleep pressure or sleep drive, and that's the time that your little one has awake since their last nap to bedtime. That can making sure they're tired enough to fall asleep easily at bedtime can be the other really big factor. So getting bedtime right that's something I talk to my parents with a lot. So as they get older, their sleep needs change and they lessen a little bit, and it's almost imperceptible until you start to find that at bedtime they're not falling asleep easily, and you think, well, what's going on here? And it may just be that you need to move the last nap of the day a bit earlier, or shorten it, or do something so that they're having a bit longer awake before their bed. So that can be bearing in mind those two things in their environment, that you can have a big influence over, really. How's your 5-month-old sleeping at the moment?
Rosy, I'm going to be honest with you, and I don't want to jinx it. She is the best little sleeper, and it is a completely different experience that I had with the twins. From about 10 weeks old, she has been sleeping throughout the night. So I give her last feed about 11:30, and she'll not peep to about 7 in the morning. And I'm nervous if that's going to change. I'm kind of waiting to hear all these stories about sleep regressions and things like that. But no, fingers crossed, she's such a little content baby, and I think it's because I have a rough idea what I'm doing this time. I'm much more settled, so therefore she's probably a little bit more settled. But I remember certainly at this stage in those early months with the twins, it was just chaotic. I'll be honest with you, I had to drive my two twins 11, 12 o'clock at night round our local town just to get them over to sleep.
Go to sleep.
About it now. My goodness. But you know what, it worked every single night, and it was great because my husband and I were in the car, and it was probably our only chance that we got to sit down and even have a conversation with each other because we were so busy during the day.
What a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it worked. It certainly worked. I know there's a lot of twin mums who had the similar experience as well. But I'm so thankful
Yeah.
so far we haven't had to do any late night drives with Laura. So I'm hoping that doesn't change. So we'll keep going anyway. I'm going to keep the positive vibes going,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
hopefully everything will
absolutely.
be
Yeah,
okay, because it's a busy
yeah,
enough household with twin toddlers. If my baby
yeah.
wasn't sleeping as well, I would find it definitely very challenging. You might be able to hear the twins in the background. It'll be time for snack time very shortly with them, but my husband's in the room, so hopefully we'll get them fed. They might make an appearance
Fantastic.
to the podcast. Sometimes they decide to just walk in at the middle of the
Guest
podcast and join
appearance.
Mommy. Yep, guest appearance very much so, so be prepared. But we keep going anyway. I'd love to make a start on exploring some of the questions that our listeners have submitted. This part of the podcast episode is where we bring our Multiples Moms group chat to life. Many of our listeners have submitted questions, and these are families who are right in the thick of it. They are navigating sleep, routines, and everything that comes with raising our multiples families. Before we begin with these queries, can I ask, for parents of multiples who are listening today, what's the most important thing that you would like them to know about sleep?
I think every day is a new day. So even if last night felt
Love that.
terrible,
Yep.
yeah, every day is a chance to start again and try something different. And, like I said earlier, if you feel like you want to work on one twin's sleep, or, one of the sleeps, and you need to separate them, nothing is forever. If it doesn't work, you can put them back together again. So don't. It can feel, when you're sleep deprived, things aren't in perspective as much as, it's easy to feel like, gosh, this is my life now. But actually, the new day, and you can try something different. Nothing is stuck in stone. And my DMs are always open as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whilst we're chatting about that, actually, yes, your Instagram account. Tell us what the handle is of your Instagram account if some people would like to get in contact with you.
Yeah, so it's baby and child, all one word, _ sleep.
Brilliant. Great.
Yeah.
Rosy has a wonderful Instagram account. I see it every day. Your content looks really good. It's super. So do make sure to check out Rosy's wonderful Instagram account, and you can also get in contact with her there. Let's take a look at some of these questions that our listeners have sent in. To begin with, we'll kick off with the lovely twin mum, Kelly. Kelly she's from here in Northern Ireland. She has twin boys who are almost 3 years old. She says this topic of sleep has come at a great time in her house. The boys are out of their toddler beds and they now share a double bed. And bedtime was great for them for months, but the last few weeks have been a real struggle. The boys are so tired come bedtime. They don't have any naps during the day, but Kelly says they do the usual bedtime routine. So, for example, somebody eat, brush their teeth, read their books, cuddles, and then tuck them in. But after they have been tucked in, they both seem to get out of bed quite a number of times. In fact, I was chatting to Kelly about it during the week, and I think one of the times was like 40 times at one night. And like, for example, whenever she sent in this question the night before that, it took her about 40 minutes to get them to stay in bed. And she kept going back in, tucking them in again so many times. She says they are tired, but she thinks it's a little game between the boys now. When they do stay in bed, they do fall asleep quickly. So Kelly is asking for all the tips on how to manage this situation, which I'm sure many families of multiples have experienced over the years.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And they, unfortunately, did you say they were 3? They're 3 years old.
Almost 3, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Almost 3, yeah.
Yeah.
So they without a nap, her bedtime is I'm sure her bedtime is right. Sometimes if they weren't quite tired enough, you might want to make bedtime a bit later. But it sounds like the fact that they're not having a nap, she knows that they're ready to go to sleep. They're just messing about and playing. So yeah, I would really concentrate on just be really boring. So when they're messing about and getting in and out of beds, try and ignore it. Don't reward that behaviour. Stay in the room. I think that often parents think, I should, especially if she was able to leave the room before. But what you want probably is just to sit in front of the door, maybe in a chair, so that they
Okay.
can't actually get out. And it's just keep reminding them in a really boring voice, it's bedtime, into bed. So that, because the minute you're starting to have to keep taking them back to bed and putting them in, it feels quite stressful for you as well.
Yeah.
And that's putting pressure on yourself. And often you might end up, at the end of a long, busy day, you might start to lose your patience as well. So if you can just sit in a chair and just feel pretty chilled about it and just say, okay, this is a phase we're going through, and keep saying, just remind them it's bedtime, into bed. Take anything out the room that they can play with too much, so just have a really boring
Okay.
bedroom for a few weeks while, if they're getting out of bed and picking up toys and stuff, just remove things at bedtime for a few weeks, and it will just be a phase. And I think if you can sort of stop it in its course, really. So
Yeah.
if you leave the room and go downstairs, or if you're trying to get on with your evening and they keep getting in and out and coming down to see it, it can feel really stressful, because you think, I just want my evening to myself, and I know you're
Yeah.
tired, go to sleep. So if you just accept for a few weeks, you're going to try and change what's happening. You're going to sit in there, be really boring. And you don't even have to sit in there if you don't want to go down that route. You could sit outside the room in the hall, but just you're making sure that they're not getting any further than their bedroom. And just keep reminding them it's bedtime. Don't engage in any conversation before the lights are turned out. Make sure that you've said, like, we're not going to talk anymore until the morning. So is there anything else you want to say to mummy? And then just when they ask questions and things, you can just say, or we'll talk about that in the morning, and just be really boring. And I always say to parents, do your best acting as well. So even though you might internally be feeling really stressed, just take a deep breath and, do your best Julia Roberts or something, and pretend that you're absolutely fine about it all. And just, in a few weeks' time, if you're not getting anywhere, then that might be the time to start thinking about different strategies, maybe having a separate bedroom, if that's possible. Maybe there's one that's leading it a bit more than the other, and maybe you need to sort of work on slightly separate bedtimes. Again, that's a bit more drastic and a bit more difficult logistically. So probably save that one for a few weeks down the line. But yeah, I would
Okay.
hope that it's just a phase. Bit of
Yeah.
impulse control. They've realised that they can mess about for a bit longer, and they fight sleep, don't they? They want to stay
Yeah.
awake and be having fun. Um, so yeah, and the other thing you can do as well is, they obviously can't tell the time yet, so you could perhaps bring bedtime a little bit earlier while they're messing about, so that that actually um, they will be falling asleep at roughly the same time. That's just another thing to think about, really.
Okay.
So if they
No, that's
mess
really
about for
helpful.
40 minutes,
Hmm.
that actually that messing about will then it will be their actual bedtime.
Yeah, which will be bang on
Yeah,
time. No, that's
yeah,
good to know.
yeah.
Another question that has been submitted is from twin mum Hannah, and she just this morning, literally before we turned the microphone on to have a chat, but Hannah says people tell me to keep her twins in the same routine, but she asks how. Hannah has twins who are 18 weeks old. They are 11 corrected. And she also has a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old in the house as well. Any advice for Hannah?
Yeah, so 18, I mean, I imagine that the 18-week-old one's now 11 weeks
Yeah.
corrected. So probably just getting the hang of night and day.
Yeah.
Bedtime is probably going to still be later for them than the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Usually 18 weeks, especially if they're only 11 weeks corrected, they'll probably be having a much later bedtime than the 2 and the 4-year-old. So
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't worry about having them all. Does she mean having them all 4 children on the same schedule?
Just thinking more about what's the smoothest approach
Bedtime.
to bedtime in her whole
Yeah,
house that probably she can get
yeah,
a chance to go to sleep herself.
yeah. I mean, I think that with the 2 and the 4-year-old, they could
Hmm.
definitely, have bath bedtime routine together.
Okay.
I think having the 4-year-old, you could maybe read stories together with the little ones in bouncy chairs. But then once the 2 and the 4-year-old are asleep, doing your bedtime routine a bit later with the younger ones, with the 18-week-old ones.
Okay.
And just because I think if you start trying to put them to bed too early and they're still needing quite a few feeds through the night, it can
Yeah.
just feel the nighttime gets very long, because usually a big stretch of sleep after their sort of initial bedtime, maybe 9 o'clock at night, maybe that's often a sort of time that sort of age baby might want to go to sleep. Then that's when your biggest stretch of sleep is going to be, usually moving forward. So if they're going to bed too early, that's too early for you to go to have your big stretch of sleep as well, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
if you put them to bed a bit later, you can go to bed at the same time and get some sleep yourself. So I would just divide and conquer, really. Do the older two first, get
Hmm.
them to sleep, and then be with the twins, spend some time with them, do their last feeds, and then get them to bed, and you go to bed at the same time. And then
Yeah.
moving forward, as they get a bit bigger and are feeding less and hopefully sleeping for longer stretches, you could, as they're on, it's really when they can go without so many naps in the day. As those naps start to reduce, you'll find that bedtime can be more similar to the 2-year-old, maybe, and you can start doing it. They can go to bed at sort of 7:30 maybe, or something like that. But I think it's a bit too much pressure early on to have everyone on the same schedule right at the beginning. But come 6 months, 7 months, you'll probably find that they can go to bed a bit earlier as well.
Yeah, that would be great. I remember, and I only had twins at this stage. Whenever they were born in the beginning, I made the mistake of feeding one, and then I fed the other. And then by the time he had finished the second one, it was time
Time
for
to
the
start
other
again.
child to be fed
Yeah,
again. And you
yeah.
just seem to get no break, or no, essentially no break whatsoever. It just seemed to
Yeah.
roll on each day. But the biggest thing I
Because you
tried to
can't,
do,
unfortunately, with sleep, it's something, and again,
yeah,
it's hard, but you don't really have any control over when they wake
yeah,
up and how quickly they're going to fall asleep. But you can have a bit more control over that feeding schedule, can't you? You
yeah,
can sort of wake them
definitely.
up and, and set the environment right. You can have
Hmm.
white noise on. You can set everything up, but the baby is master of their own body clock and will decide when and where they wake up, really.
Yeah, it's same.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay,
Yeah.
Hannah, hopefully that is helpful for you. The next question on my list here is from twin mum Catherine. And Catherine asks, she's looking for tips on putting the two babies down and doing the nighttime routine on her own at night. So obviously she's only one at home with the twins. Catherine's twins are 14 months old, and she says one of her twins can be quite needy as well. So whenever Catherine's on her own, what advice would you have for her in terms of that nighttime routine?
I
Work with
hear that a
them.
lot, actually, that
Do
one
you?
twin is
Okay.
a better sleeper than,
Yeah.
the easier
The
to
other.
get down than the, which is, again, you would find that with siblings, wouldn't you, anyway?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, just get the one that's slightly easier. It's horrible to label them, isn't it? But the one that's a bit easier to get down, not maybe quite as needy at bedtime. Get them sorted first, and then
Yeah.
spend a bit longer with the other one. Maybe going into another room, reading an extra story or something while the other one settles down for sleep easily on their own, and then taking the once baby number one is asleep, going
Yeah.
back in with the second one and trying to settle them, giving them a bit more help, so that you're not disturbing the one that's happy to fall asleep more easily. And you just sort of, again, that can be really stressful. If you've got one
Yeah.
baby that's needy and wanting more cuddles, etc., and you're then thinking, well, you're now going to disturb the one that's sleeping well. So yeah, just remove
Yeah.
yourself from the situation and go and
Hmm.
read another story, listen to some lullabies, something soothing for you as well. I think
Hmm.
bedtime, I think we just feel so much pressure as mums in particular to be perfect and to have this perfect bedtime routine where you're reading and singing and you know whatever you want to, but actually some nights just are mayhem,
Yeah.
and it's not,
Definitely.
give yourself some grace. Like I say,
Hmm.
tomorrow's another day. Just get through
Hmm.
it the best you can. Even if, even if you what people might describe as a bad habit. Even if
Hmm.
for a few weeks you're doing, more, you're lying down on your bed with the one that's having a bit more of a tough time falling asleep, and getting them all chilled and then transferring them once they're asleep. Because again, it will be a phase. And you can work on it when you feel strong enough to work on it. That's the other thing. I used to
Okay.
find that in health visiting a lot. People would say, "I'm absolutely exhausted. Tell me what to do," and I would go over, some strategies, and then I'd see them in a few weeks' time. Oh, I haven't done any of that. It didn't work, or and actually,
Yeah.
often what's happening, it wasn't the right time for them. It
Yeah.
wasn't
Fair
it.
enough.
The, you know, if life is just a bit too busy, a bit too hectic, go
Yeah.
with what works now, and then worry about. You'll know when the time is right to work on sleep, and I think, you know, another month's not going to make any difference. If you have to give one twin a bit more help, and that might mean lying down with them in your bed, or having them fall asleep with you, or something like that. Don't worry about it. You work on it. Work on it when you feel strong enough to deal with it.
We have triplet mum Julianne. Julianne's from California, and she says that her triplets have always been great sleepers. They slept through the night by about 3 months old, but their baby sister, who is up, she is up about at least 4 times a night, sometimes every hour. She is 11 months old now. Julianne asks, is it perhaps because she was breastfed and the triplets were in formula that that's why she's not sleeping? What's your thoughts on that? I've never heard of that question before. What do you think? What advice would you have for Julianne? Is she right?
I would say, I mean, obviously, there's the jury is out on that one. I think, I think breast milk is meant to be um, digested a bit more easily, a bit more quickly. So it may be that's, going through, she's more hungry. But at 11 months, I would say she could be getting enough calories in the day from her weaning onto solids, and the breast milk she's having during the day, not to be needing too many breastfeeds at night time, to be honest. Especially
Okay.
if she was born at term and has followed her growth centile and there's no other developmental or nutrition concerns, I would say, big feed at bedtime. So she's breastfeeding the 11-month-old, is she?
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. So I would say give a really big feed at bedtime, as big as you can. And I would, if she's not already, I would try and encourage her to help the baby fall asleep without feeding or being
Okay.
rocked or being held, and then trying to get her in her crib or her sleep space by herself. So giving
Hmm.
her lots of help, patting, shushing, stroking, but not feeding and not being cuddled, because that often is the main thing. At 11 months old, I would say that's
Yeah.
often the main thing that can help them in the night, so that when they stir in the night, they think, oh yeah, I'm in my cot, that's fine. Because if they fell asleep on you or feeding, they're
Hmm.
going to want that recreated at 3 in the morning or whatever they need.
Yeah.
They need that. So I would say 11 months old, often they're really quite active, even if they're not quite crawling or walking yet. They're
Okay.
using
Yeah.
so many calories during the day that actually just think about really nutrient dense foods in the day, and making sure that that bedtime feed is both breasts if possible, and so that that she's had really good food during the day. At night time, that she's not waking through hunger, and then work on her settling at bedtime. So yeah, I personally, I think lots of breastfed babies sleep just as well as formula fed babies. So I think that's probably a bit, I'm not a lactation consultant. I'm not an expert on that, but I would say by 11 months, she would be able to get enough calories in the day pretty much. Maybe just one feed in the night by 11 months, often towards morning when the sleep drive has kind of worn off. They've had really good sleep already, and it's heading towards morning. Often parents will find a nice big breastfeed in them, towards morning will help them sleep to a better time, to maybe 6 or 7 rather than 5, or. So yeah, it's a really good question, but I wouldn't worry too much, and I would work more on those other things, to help her not wake up so much. that's my bread and butter, really, I would say. That sort of 11 months old, still waking lots overnight. So that she can definitely send me a message and I can help her out a bit more if she wants.
There you go, Julianne. If you are keen to get in contact with Rosie, she shared her Instagram handle
Yeah.
with her earlier, and don't be
Yeah.
afraid to send her a little DM. I
Yeah.
hope that's
Send me a
helpful
DM. That's
for you.
completely fine. Yeah.
We'll move on. We have twin mum Amy as well, and she is keen to know, when is there a particular age that you should drop naps during the day? And this is something I would love to know as well. I know certainly at the minute that my girls will be coming 3 in a couple of months' time, and they still really like their nap. If some days, I know when we're out at Tots Group, for example, so it's been that morning, it's been a busy old morning, they're very active. Sometimes one of them won't sleep, and if they don't get that nap in the afternoon time, they are very cranky later on. So to me, they definitely still need their little nap. But is there a certain age that we should be working towards that they shouldn't be having a nap, or is that
Yeah.
even a thing, or do we just, is it
Great.
child led?
Yeah, really child-led. It's a great question. And
Okay.
it's the one that's dropping that last nap that's the most variable, I would say. Usually you can say that by 8, 9 months, they're having 2 naps. By 14, 15
Two.
months, they're down to 1 nap. And then that sort of 1 nap that when they drop that 1 nap, that's really variable. So what I usually say is it's definitely behaviour. So if your little one, if like you say, if your one's very unhappy and tired,
Yeah.
and often they don't want to eat their tea, their behaviour changes, they still need that nap. So I
Yeah.
usually would say, try and, as they're sort of heading over between 2 and 3, maybe cut the nap a little bit in the day if you find it's affecting bedtime. So maybe if they were having 2 hours, drop it to 18, 1.5 sort of hours, maybe an hour. Just get it to a level where that bedtime is not going to be affected. Or if they need, if you want to give them a 2-hour nap, some parents, especially if you've got multiples, that might just literally give you enough space to, get some jobs done. And, then I would just say, while they're having that longer nap and they're a bit older, make bedtime later so that you're not having that sort of prolonged bedtime, where they're messing about and they're obviously just not tired enough because they've had a big nap in the middle of the day. So I would say it's child-led very much, but
Okay.
also what you want as a parent. So if you don't want bedtime to be too late, then cut the nap. And then you will know. Sometimes what also will happen, people talk about midnight parties. Sometimes they'll fall asleep. They'll
Yes.
fall asleep fine, because they were tired enough at bedtime and they've got their circadian rhythm, and so they fall asleep easy enough. But then maybe at 1 a.m. they're awake for 2 hours. So sometimes dropping the nap at that point can help with that as well. It's a bit of a fine line because sometimes overtiredness can cause a bit of waking as well, but that's much
Yeah.
less of an issue. I would say it's normally that they're not quite tired enough. I remember when my daughter was at nursery, there was a little boy there who, when I went to, so it was preschool. So she was
Yeah.
about 3 or 4. And there was a little boy there that was always asleep when we went to pick them up at lunchtime. So he
Oh.
was, he was 3 or 4, still having an hour nap, and then other children, there's no chance they don't want to miss out on all the fun and they won't have a nap. So yeah, it can be very child-led, but a little bit of what you want as well.
Yeah, that's really good to know. That is a big question I'll hopefully discuss is, I would love to know myself. My twins will be starting nursery this September, so that is quite a big transition in our house. It has always been mum, dad, the twins, and now baby Laura at home. So this will be their first step into the big old world on their own. And I am wondering, with big life transitions that all of us do experience from time to time, perhaps a new baby, returning to work, or starting nursery or primary school, with big changes happening in our kids' lives, what about sleep? What might sleep look like? For example, once my twins start in nursery, with that big change, might I see a little change in their sleep? And if I do, what's the best thing I could do about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And often when parents look back, they can say, oh, that's what caused that, sort of that bedtime, that, that's why bedtimes went a bit out the window for a few weeks. It's usually only in hindsight that you think, oh yeah. So to think about it beforehand is really helpful. But yeah, I think it's really just keeping that consistency with your routines as much as you can. Babies and toddlers, children, they all love routine. They all love it. It helps them feel safe. So I
Yeah.
think, if you know that you're not, that you've got a big change like this happening, just really hone in on your bedtime routine for a little while. Just really make sure that you've got time to spend with them as well. They'll have loads of questions and things that they see, and that they hear that they're going to want to chat through with you. So making I always think it's nice to talk about those things before bedtime, so that if they've got any worries, they've aired them before that lovely bedtime routine and protect it a little bit. So sometimes parents do say, maybe at tea time, was there anything at nursery today that you want to talk about? And, try and do it earlier in the evening rather than as they're getting ready for bed, so that
Okay.
anything that they were a little bit worried about has been covered already, if you like. But yeah, definitely and also they'll probably be a bit more tired as well.
Yeah.
So they might need
Good point.
a slightly earlier bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
And again, being individuals but also twins, you might need to sort of bear that in mind. One may adapt to it much more easily than the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is, anything like that. But again, equally, although I say they love routine, again, I always want to say to parents, if you're going on holiday or you've got, a wedding or something like that, a few
Mm-hmm.
nights where the routine goes out the window, it doesn't matter. It's important to live life as well and not be totally, bedded to your, excuse the pun, bedtime routine, really. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, it's harder with multiples, isn't it? Because routine is
Yeah.
so key. But sometimes, don't worry too much if it all goes out the window for a few nights.
That's really good to know. Obviously, we're in the spring, we're coming into the summer season now, and lots of us will be going away on holidays. And I'm sure, wherever the different location, different beds, sleep may be up the left, I would say.
Yeah.
So that's reassured to know, hopefully, whenever we come home again from our holidays, that the routines will nicely
Just
go
get
back
back
into
into it
place
when you get
again.
home. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
good to
again,
know,
it's about
actually.
protecting what you value as parents. So we're all
Yeah.
different, aren't we? And if you want to stick to your routine while you're on holiday and other people are saying, oh, just, come out for dinner with us. If it's important to you that you don't do that and that you stick to your routine, that's your choice. And
Yeah.
don't, obviously, your trusted family and friends, you will listen to their advice. But if at the end of the day you decide, no, actually, I am going to get them in bed for 7 as usual, then you do that, because it's, you're their parent. You know what works best for
Mhm.
you all.
Yeah, I love that. I love that advice, because certainly whenever I became a mum, lots of people try to give me different advice. Sleep was definitely a big thing. And sometimes I could find it so overwhelming because so many different people were telling me all these different things.
Yeah.
So I love that. I
Yeah.
kind of just decided to go with my gut and what worked for
Yeah.
us in our home.
Yeah.
And so far it's working out very well for me,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And, just
Yes,
try new things. And if it doesn't work, go back to what you were doing before.
something
It's
else.
your choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have 2 more submitted questions left.
Yeah.
Some of your answers have been really, really helpful, Rosie, things that I hadn't even
Brilliant.
thought about. So no, thank you. The last one is the episode before this one, we discussed potty training. A lot of our
Yeah.
listeners are like ourselves. We're at that stage in our lives in the middle of potty training. Triplet mum Laura asks, how do we navigate sleep during this important milestone whilst we're trying to potty train our families as well?
Nighttime toilet training comes quite a bit later than daytime toilet training. So I don't think it would have that much impact on nighttime if you're just doing the daytime toilet training. And I think, obviously, what you can start to do if they're getting the hang of it during the day is you could get them to do a last wee before you put their nighttime nappy on. And you will probably find once you do daytime toilet training, that in the nighttime you may find that they are getting a bit more bladder control and their nappies aren't as wet. But I wouldn't really do anything differently, I think.
Yeah.
the nighttime toilet training usually comes quite a bit later. And then once they are ready to be toilet trained at night, it's really important that you don't withhold fluids or wake them up sometimes parents think it's helpful to lift them, maybe at 11 at night or whatever when you go to bed. But actually the advice is that you don't do that now, is because you're not really encouraging them to, it's hormonal. So you're waiting for them to be, for their hormonal, it's the antidiuretic hormone for it's all very biological. It's not what you're doing. So obviously give them a drink if they want one. Don't try and withhold drink. Obviously don't give them masses of fluid before bedtime, but normal drinking as normal. But as far as daytime toilet training goes, I wouldn't do anything different at night time.
Okay, good to know. So actually, that's a big one for a lot of our listeners. And the very last question is, another twin mum asks, what's the best approach for night terrors? One of her children at the minute is going through this phase. What would you say to her?
This is really interesting. So night terrors happen earlier in the night, and then nightmares happen later in the night. So it's as our sleep shifts. So we have a lot more dream sleep later in the night. Earlier in the night, we're having this deep sleep, which is when night terrors can occur. And that can be when they do sleepwalking and sleep talking as well. Often it can be when they're overtired. So sometimes you find that if they are going a bit too late to bed, sometimes people find it when you're on holiday, if sleep's slightly disrupted. If you've been on a plane journey in the evening and they've gone to bed late, often the following night when they're catching up on sleep and they're in a deeper sleep than normal, they can have a night terror. So if it's more than just a sort of one-off, often if they've got a fever or something like that, it can trigger them. Usually it's much more frightening for you than it is for them because they're not going to remember it in the morning. So often they look really alarmed. They can be shouting out and you can be really worried, but all you need to do is keep them safe. Don't try and wake them up, get them back to bed. With a nightmare later in the night, they will remember it. So you'll know the difference. They'll be talking to you in the morning about their scary dream. So really, I would say if it's a night terror earlier in the night, and it's just happening one-off here and there, don't worry. But if it's happening regularly, what I often recommend, and this can really work, is if you keep a bit of a sleep diary and look at the time that they're waking. So if they go to bed at 7:30 and it's nearly always around 11 o'clock at night that they're having this night terror, what you can do is maybe 10 minutes beforehand is go in and just gently make them stir, not to wake them up, but maybe just stroke their cheek or cough or something. Do something that just makes them turn over and disturbs them a little bit. And then that can put them into a new cycle of sleep. And you just need to do that for maybe, a few nights to just try and reset what's happening. So that can be really helpful, just to keep an eye on the time that it's happening and just preempt it for a little while. If it's sometimes it can also it can run in families as well. So it might be worth asking your partner or, grandparents, if the baby's mum or dad was doing that as well. That can often be. And unfortunately there's, if it's sleepwalking and sleep talking, that kind of thing, there's not much you can do about it other than keep them safe and know that you're finding it more disturbing than they are. They're actually fine. They don't remember it in the morning. With nightmares that happen later in the night as children get older, and maybe even the most innocuous TV program or story might have triggered something. So if they're going through a bit of a phase of having bad dreams, just be really careful what they watch on TV and what stories you're reading. I mean, I often say I've read my children Mog the Cat. And now when I look back, I think, why was I reading? There's one about a burglar that breaks in and the Mog the Cat has to scare the burglar off. And I'm like, why did I read that to my children when they were tiny? So just, have a little thing, even the Gruffalo might be scary to some children. So it's just worth, if they're having nightmares, just have a little think about, they might be a little bit more sensitive to what you're reading and what they're seeing.
That's good
so
to know. My goodness,
hope that clears that one up.
Brilliant. Listen, Rosie, thank
Yeah,
you so much for taking the time to answer these queries for us. And a big thank you to all of the mums as well who submitted those
yeah,
questions. I hope
yeah. Thank you so much.
what Rosie has said has been helpful for you. Rosie, remind us of what your handle is on Instagram if any of our listeners want to get in contact with you, maybe want to explore some of these questions a little bit further with you.
Yep. So it's baby and child _ sleep.
Before we go, I just have a couple of other questions I want to ask you,
Yeah.
if that's okay. First one, the one that just popped up in my mind whenever you were chatting earlier is moving from cot to toddler beds. Should parents do that transition with multiples all at once? And is there a set time that a child you would recommend to no longer be in a cot? Or again, is it child-led?
Yeah. So this is a really good one, actually. I would definitely keep your little ones in their cot
Okay.
if that's where they've been sleeping, as long as you can. So as long as it's safe to keep them in there. So often you hear about little ones climbing out, in which case you're going to have to keep them safe. So they'll need a toddler bed then. Often, again, around the 2 mark, they still don't have impulse control really. So if you try and put them in a bed too young, they're going to be in and out, and it's really hard to persuade them to stay in bed. So if you can keep them in a cot for as long as possible, especially with multiples, that's going to make your life a lot easier. Once the time has come, they're just too big for their cot, or they're not safe in there anymore, then I would, again, it's probably whether you do it at the same time. I haven't even considered that question before. Sometimes if it's not safe for them to be in their cot, I often recommend a travel cot, because that can often be a bit harder for them to climb out of.
Escape.
That might give you a little, might give you an extra month or so till they're reasoning has improved a little bit more, with every month that goes by, they're changing so much. You might find that in a month's time, it's a bit easier to persuade them to stay in a bed. So anything that you can do to keep them in there so that they're safe, and that they love that sort of security of having the cot around them. But once you move them into I'm going to think on my feet here, really. That would be great to hear from your listeners what they've done, actually. Because I don't know whether. My instinct probably would be, if they're similar personalities, do them at the same time. Put them into a cot, because they're probably going to feel. They don't want to feel left out, and they probably want to do the same as the other one, don't they? So I think I think my instinct would be that they're going to want to do it at the same time. But then, like I say, you can change things. So if it's not working out, you can put the one that's maybe causing a few more issues into a travel cot, maybe for a few weeks, and see if that buys you a bit more time. But generally, I would think they'd probably leave it as long as you can. In some instances, it's not safe, so you have to put them in a bit earlier than you would like, in which case you're going to need to make sure that the bedroom's safe. And everything. So have you yours in a toddler bed now?
They are. Laura's 5 months old at the minute, and the big thing for me is I'll have to we have her in a little next to me in the room with us, obviously, at the minute, and the big transition for her will be into a cot in the room of her own. I remember, I think we waited until around the 9-month mark with the twins until we made this change, and it worked very well for me. But we'll probably change her into a bigger cot in a room of her own a little bit earlier. So once that happens, the twins will be moving to a completely different room. So I am nervous about that. They are in their toddler beds at the minute. I was dreading it, thinking, gosh, how will this go? Another big change from cots to beds. And I kind of thought, you know what, let's just go for it. Let's just put the two of them in the beds together and see what happens. And I would say once we got to night 3, they were familiar with their new bed. They're familiar with the new setup. We did have to make the room safe. We did what you had said earlier, make the room a little bit more boring. So it took some of the toys out so they can't go up and play, which Kelly's experiencing at the minute. That's very much a true thing in our house. They were playing with everything and toys and wouldn't settle.
The novelty of it.
After time, the toddler beds worked very well for me, and it was nowhere near as scary as I thought it would be.
I think that's such an important point. I think often parents really especially first-time parents dread that
Yeah.
transition into their own room
Definitely.
when baby moves to their own. Actually, young babies they're so adaptable that they
Yeah.
barely even notice that. And I think you'll probably find with your twins when they go into their new room, with, like you say, within a few nights, they'll have adapted to the change so easily.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
hope
often
so.
we big it up in our brains a lot more than actually it turns out to be an issue.
In reality.
Yeah.
The question that every parent wants answered, do we ever get a full night's sleep ever again?
Do you know what? I love that question because my children are all older now, but when they were teenagers and they were going out with their friends and things, I thought, how awake my husband would be snoring next to me and I would be lying awake worrying. So I think, unfortunately, you are always going to be slightly more on edge than you were before you had children, but you will sleep again. You will have teenagers that you can't get out of bed in the morning before you know it. That comes around really quickly. But during the really tough times, don't be afraid to ask for help and don't be afraid to have a daytime rest. People will often say to me, I can't sleep in the day. That's no good for me. I'm too busy or whatever. But if you can get someone to give you just half an hour where they're looking after your little ones for you, if they're not still having a daytime nap and you're at the end of your tether, just go and have a rest and look after yourself, because especially being a multiple mum, everyone needs you to be functioning. And if that means half an hour, and what's happened, what we've seen in research is that people that think they've had all the sort of nodes on their head and they've been in a research sleep lab and they've said, oh no, I didn't sleep. Actually, when they've looked at the waves, they've seen that they did actually drop off. So even if you're resting on your bed for half an hour, it may be that you have a tiny little micro sleep without you knowing, and that can just be enough to help
Take
you
you over.
see. Yeah, I mean, Usain Bolt used to have a little rest before a race. Athletes do it quite a bit. And they just have a really small nap to give themselves a bit more get up and go, as it were.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's really
I would.
interesting.
I think it's so important when you're in the thick of it, not to think everyone else is coping. It's just me that feels like this. Actually, everyone has been where you are, especially multiple parents. Just ask for a bit of help, and people will often be so glad to give it.
Absolutely. And what a beautiful way to end there. That's super, super advice. That brings us to the end of our chat on all things sleep for multiples. Rosy, thank you so much for joining us today. Your advice has been incredibly reassuring for parents who are navigating sleep with more than one little person at the same time. Sleep can be so overwhelming, or it can feel so overwhelming for many of us. So it's wonderful to have your guidance and expertise on the podcast. And to everyone listening today, this episode is part of our Multiples Mums group chat series here on the Twins Mummy NI podcast. Conversations designed to help you feel less alone and more confident in the everyday realities of raising multiples. If you found this episode helpful, please do share it with another multiples mum who might be finding sleep challenging right now. Before you go, Rosy, can you tell our listeners where they can find you?
So I have a website, which again is babyandchildsleep.com. And you can email me at Rosy@babyandchildsleep.com. My Rosy is spelled ROSY, which can confuse people. And obviously on Instagram, I'm usually there most weeks. I wouldn't say every day, but and I definitely look at my DMs. So if anyone wants to send me a DM, I give loads of free advice. And often your question might turn into a post or an Instagram story, so it might be helpful to other mums as well. So don't be afraid to send me a message if you want to ask something.
Super.
So that's the two ways, website or Instagram, really.
Website or Instagram. Brilliant. Rosy, a huge thank you for sharing such thoughtful and practical advice with us today. And thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the show, hit follow so you don't miss any episodes coming up. I'll see you all in the next episode. Same place, same chat, with plenty more multiple specific conversations coming your way. Take care.